Hello, this is a presentation on collusion-proof auctions based on the research of Audrey Hu and others. A link for the original study will be at the end of the presentation. Let's start with some background for different auction types. So first, when people heard the word auction, they usually think of what we call an English auction, where people start with a low price and bid up against each other until no one goes any higher in price and the item is sold to the last bidder. There are of course many other auction types as well. A very common one is sealed bid auctions, where buyers bid their price in envelopes or today in some form sealed electronic systems, and then the auctioneer reveals the prices and the highest bid wins. Usually sealed bid auctions are either so-called first price auctions, where the winner pays their bid, or they may be a second price auctions where the winner pays the second highest bid. So the goal of the auctioneer is always to maximize their profit, which usually means getting the highest price for the item. The auction type is based on what best achieves this goal. The buyers, of course, try to win the auction by paying as little as possible. And because auctions are used on very unique goods, the value for the buyers may differ by a lot. Basically, all the buyers have a so-called hidden value for the good, which is the absolute highest amount they are willing to pay for it. Firstly, let's look at the basic English auction. In English auction, buyers can see what other buyers are bidding and when they are dropping out, and this reveals some information between the bidders and may lead to higher bids when buyers see that other people are willing to pay some amounts for the good. On the downside for the auctioneer, if the value of the good differs by a lot between the winner and the second highest bid, the auctioneer may not get the best price possible for the good. For example, let's say that the auctioneer is selling a painting and bidder 1 values this painting in 100 million and bidder 2's value for the painting is 10 million. In English auction, when the price goes to 11 million, the bidder 2 drops out and painting is sold, even though the bidder 1 would have been ready to go to the 100 million. So do the seal bid auctions solve this? The answer is that they may. In the auction, if the auction is done by seal bid second price, there is an incentive to bid the real value for the good for you, because if you win, you'll have to pay the second highest bid, so not the value that you put on in your bid. So you will always win. So in this painting example, the bidder 1 would have put the 100 million, but he only would have paid 10 million, so the auctioneer would have been worse off. However, in more competitive auction, the second price auction may work very well because it incentivizes the real value bids. If the auction is done by a first price seal bid auction, in the example auction, the bidder 1 could have bid the 100 million, or at least somewhere close to that, so the auctioneer would have get a better price for the painting. Then again, it may have been that the bidder 1 would have known bidder 2's limits, that the bidder 2 can only go up to the 10 million or so. So the bidder 1 also could have bid something lower and not his real value bid. Then there is also a lesser known auction called Amsterdam second price auction. The way this works is that the auction begins as an English auction where price goes up like in normal English auction. Then when there are only 2 bidders left, the auction stops and the last 2 give their last bid as a seal bid. And the price that the phase 1 stops defines a bottom price for the second phase. So the seal bid must be at least as high as this bottom price. In the second phase, the highest bidder wins and pays price equal to the second highest bid. But in this auction, there is something called premium, so the both bidders of the second phase receive a premium which is a fraction of the difference between the second highest bid and the bottom price. For example, if the difference between the bottom price and the second highest bid is 1 million, both bidders may get 100,000. So this gives both bidders an incentive to bid up the price in the second phase, even if they know that they won't win or even don't want to win in that case. In the example painting auction, this may lead to higher bids because bidder 2 wants to get the premium and bidder 1 knows this but has a lot of leeway for their actual price, so he will bid something much higher to ensure that they win the painting. The other thing that the auctioneer is worried about is collusion between buyers. For example, if there are a lot of items being sold in some auction, buyers can collude so everyone gets what they most want as low of a price as possible. For example, buyers may reveal their bids for each other before the auction and decide a winner who will buy the good for a lower price and pay other bidders not to bid. Collusion is of course illegal, but it's quite hard to prove. Andrew Hu and others conducted a research where they studied which auction type works best against the collusion, the English auction, the first price sealed bid auction, or the Amsterdam second price auction. The study was conducted as a lab study where a total of 180 university students worked as buyers trying to earn points which they could then exchange to money after the study, so they had a real incentive to get good results. They used English auction, first price sealed bid auction and the Amsterdam auction. In English auction, a thermometer showing the price started to rise from 0 and bidders decided when to quit. When all but one bidder had pushed the quit button, the price stopped and remaining bidder bought the good for that price. In first price sealed bid auction, the subjects submitted simultaneously sealed bids for the good, and the highest bid bought the good for the price equal to their bid. If the bids were tied, a computer resolved them randomly. In Amsterdam auction, first phase was done similarly with the thermometer until 2 bidders remained, and then the second phase, 2 remaining bidders simultaneously submitted sealed bids, at least as high as the bottom price. The second phase, bidders earned a premium equal to 30% of the difference between the second highest bid and the bottom price. So there were 3 auction environments. First, symmetric environment without collusion. Then a symmetric environment with collusion, and the third was an asymmetric environment with collusion. Every bidder had a starting capital of 50 points. In symmetric environment, all subjects draw a value for the good between 0 and 50. And in asymmetric environment, 3 out of the 6 bidders per auction were so-called strong bidders, receiving a value between 70 and 120. In a symmetric environment with collusion, all subjects were able to collude, and in the asymmetric environment, only strong bidders were able to collude between themselves. And if they decided to cooperate, only they knew, making it impossible for the weak bidders to know whether they're facing a cartel or not. The cost of collusion was between 0 and 7 in the symmetric cases and between 2 and 20 in the asymmetric environment. So, what are the findings of this study? Let's go through them one at a time. First, the symmetric environment without collusion. In this environment, bidding was most competitive in the first prize sealed bid auction, which raised most revenue for the auctioneer, while Amsterdam and English auction raised similar profits. This is what one could think as a baseline for the auctions, because this is the way auction should legally go. Also, by being most competitive, it raised the incentive for collusion highest for the in the first prize sealed bid auctions in the other 2 environments that were conducted after this. Second environment, so symmetric environment with collusion. With the high incentive for collusion in the first prize sealed bid auction, it raised most collusive votes in this environment compared to the English auction or the Amsterdam auction. Also, with the possibility to collude, the private value mechanism for the higher bids in the first prize compared into the English auction disappeared. The English auction raised slightly more votes for collusion than the Amsterdam auction did. In the way of revenue, because large amount of collusion, the first prize sealed bid auction had a larger spike, as you can see in that picture, in the 0 revenue than the other 2, and therefore raised less revenue than the other 2. However, there was no significant statistical difference in the total revenue between the 3. So then the last environment, asymmetric environment with collusion. With strong bidders, the Amsterdam auction worked best to lessen collusion compared to the first prize sealed bid auction and English auction. And between those 2, there was no statistical difference between the collusion votes. From the 3, English auction was most vulnerable of raising very low revenues, but there was no statistical difference between first prize sealed bid auction and English auction between the revenues. However, the Amsterdam auction raised about 10% more revenue than the other 2, so it worked best. Of course, both in environment 2 and 3, with the possibility of collusion, the cost of collusion had a very big impact on deciding whether to collude or not. With the higher cost, the less collusion. So, what are the takeaways from these studies? What can we learn? Firstly, auctioneers should know as much about the bidders as possible to know how likely collusion is, and if possible to make the collusion as expensive as possible. Second, based on what kind of bidders auctioneer thinks there will be, he should choose the auction type accordingly. if there are high probability of collusion, it might be best to choose the Amsterdam auction because it makes collusion unattractive for the bidders. But then again, if there is no chance of collusion, it might be best to go with the first price sealed bid auction because it raised most profits in the first environment. Lastly, I have only examined one study in this presentation, which compared only 3 different types of auctions, but there are of course many more types of auctions that may work best in different situations. For example, Paul Microm's and Robert Wilson's work on auction theory, on which they won Nobel Prize on economics. It is used to format auctions on telecommunication frequencies, for example in Finland and Sweden. And I highly recommend that if you are a bit interested in auctions, you look it up. It is very informative to learn how it is possible to conduct a multi-level auction that will get the real value bids. But that was my presentation, and here is the original study if someone is interested in it. So thank you.